Hi, my name is Bimbo FOLA-ALADE. This is the Love Institute, the place where you learn to strengthen those key relationships. Hi, Periscopers. Welcome to a very, very special edition of the Love Institute, the Married Couples Edition. Last week, I mentioned to you that I have a special guest for you tonight, and I'm going to keep my promise. But just to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of intro into what we're going to be talking about tonight. The topic is married but living apart. I decided to do this show because increasingly a number of married couples are living apart. And we want to explore what are the consequences for the marriage, how does it impact the marriage, is it a good thing to do? If you decide to do it, how can you do it in a way that doesn't harm your marriage? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Research shows that as many as 5% of married couples, this was a research done in the UK in 2013, that as many as 5% of married couples live apart, i.e. live in different countries, or if they live in the same country, they live in distant parts of the country. So perhaps one person is working in London, another person is living in Devon, for example. Why is this happening? And I'm sure that there is an even higher percentage amongst African and Caribbeans, because we're migrant nations. A lot of people are ready to move to different countries to look for a better standard of living. So I'm sure 5% is definitely an underestimation for African and Caribbeans. But why are people doing this? People are doing this for a number of reasons. One is mainly financial. For some people, they are able to get a better standard of pay in a different country, or perhaps for some people who work in certain industries that are highly sought in some Middle Eastern countries, they're being attracted there by the fact that they don't have to pay tax on what it is that they earn. Some people are relocating because they want to start a business, for example. Perhaps, they've always wanted to start a business, and they feel that the terrain in a particular country is better than the country that they live in. And yet some other people want to study and feel that the best place to study a particular subject is in a different country. So people are moving to different countries for different reasons. The question we're interested in is, what is the impact for the marriage? What is the consequence for the marriage? So we're going to talk about the pros, and we're going to talk about the cons. Now, the pros, obvious for some people, say, well, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So when you're apart, you appreciate each other more, you get to value your spouse a little bit more. And then every time that you meet, it's a celebration, it's reconnection, because you haven't had time to get tired of each other or take advantage of each other. You value each other more as a couple. Some people also like the fact that it gives them some space. They have their time to do the things that are important to them, either to work more or to study or to take part in some particular hobbies that are very time consuming, that's important to them, or perhaps even to commit to church and spiritual issues. So some people like the fact that they have maybe the kind of time they used to have when they were single, which they haven't had as a married person. So those are the pros. But in my estimation, the cons far outweigh the pros. So what are some of the cons? Well, obviously, the first thing is that you're living apart. Because of the fact that you're living apart, you're maintaining two households. So if, for example, I know some young couples where the wife is a housewife because maybe they have small children, the husband is working abroad. So his salary has got to maintain two households. Now, that's very, very demanding, even for somebody who is, quite well paid. The financial pressures are there. And then, of course, there is the pressure on the closeness of the family, especially for a young couple, where key events such as, a child's first step, a child's first word can be missed, or even just the toddler years where, they're growing and changing almost every day. You can miss whole tracts of what's going on in your children's lives. And it's not only happening on the parent-to-child level, it's also happening on the partner-to-partner level. So oftentimes spouses can lose each other if they're not careful. The connection can be lost because there isn't that daily interaction that, builds familiarity and lays the foundation and the strength for, for a marriage. You're not doing daily life together. So it's almost like dating again, but dating somebody who's in a different country. The possibility of a gap or space coming between the couple, is greatly heightened. And of course, we know what happens once there's distance between a couple. It's easy for somebody else to fill the void. So there's a possibility of emotional closeness, perhaps with somebody at work or, somebody, a neighbor in the new place that you've moved to, and give emotional closeness enough time between members of the opposite sex, and it's not unreasonable to assume that physically inappropriate behavior will also happen. So there is a consequence, or there is a possibility of huge consequences for your marriage. As a marriage counselor, a lot of these couples in this or in this situation that I've counseled, oftentimes there's been a child involved. So a couple a husband has moved to a different country, has been there 2 or 3 years. By the time the wife relocates, there might be another child already in the picture from another relationship, or there might be another woman in the relationship that they have to contend with. So it's important to have the real facts and the real possibilities of what could happen in mind when you're making these sorts of decisions about where it is that you're going to live. How is it that you're going to meet the physical needs that you have as a man, as a wife, and as husband and wife? The void of sexual intimacy, how is that going to be met, in appropriate ways? So these are all the sorts of issues that a couple who are living apart have got to negotiate, and agree on. The person who is left at home, perhaps with children, may also struggle with issues of animosity, anger, hurt, because in effect they're parenting alone. They're doing two people's jobs. So an emergency comes at school, they have to rush there. The sex talk that should be had with the teenage son, with the dad, the mom has to do it. So if it's not well managed, there can also be the issue of burnout. For the partner that is left with the household duties, the parenting, and the looking after the household structure. So there are many, many possible fallouts from this. And I'm really concerned that couples talk about this, discuss this intelligently, discuss it knowingly, and have clear agreement about how they're going to manage this season of their life, so that they can ensure that there is a marriage still intact at the end of the period of living apart. So in the next section, I'm going to be talking to a very, very special couple who have had a spell within their marriage where they lived apart. And they're going to be sharing with us their life lessons, how they managed it, to ensure that when that season was over, their marriage was still intact. So keep on watching. I think you'll really enjoy it. So today I'm with their Toyes. They've been married for 26.5 years. The half is very important. And today we're going to be talking about living apart even though you're married. It's something that you guys experience in a particular season. So we're here today just to learn about your experience and to gain some principles that you think will benefit other people who, for some reason, have to live apart at some point in their marriage. So tell us a little bit about your initial experience. What led to the decision for you to move abroad? Doc is a doctor. We call him Doc. He's a doctor. I know you run your own business. So what was it that made you decide at some point that you wanted to relocate to Nigeria for a year?
Thank you. In 2011, I had this opportunity to spend a year in Nigeria. I was approached. When I was first approached, I decided to not give them an immediate answer, but I asked them to give me time to speak with my wife, because I felt I was at that time when I needed a break from the NHS, and it was an opportune time. But I felt it was very important that I involved my wife right in at the decision-making stage.
Yeah, when we were talking earlier, that was one thing that I found really interesting, that when you were approached with the offer, you didn't just say, oh yes, I want to do it, even though you felt it came at the right time, it was what you needed. It wasn't something you just jumped on and thought, okay, I'll persuade my wife, but it was something that you wanted to table with her first. I thought that was quite important. Is that a way that you normally make decisions, or was that just a one-off?
Toy?
Oh, that's the way we normally make decisions, especially when it comes to decisions that will affect every single member of the family. We normally just, sit down, discuss, and see how, we can take it forward from there.
So how did you feel when you heard that your husband might be moving out of the country for a year?
Initially, there was the, a bit of reservation and all that, but I just felt it was something that he needed to do. All along, he's always kind of had that at the back of his mind. Maybe he wanted to see how it would be like to work in Nigeria, and if that was an avenue that he could pursue in the future. And I felt he just needed to go there just to see what the opportunities were.
You mentioned that he was going there to explore. So was it okay, I'm going and I'm going to see whether or not we can stay there long term, or I'm just going for a year?
The plan was to go for a year, although we had in the past discussed whether we would move back to Nigeria, but I wasn't of a mind at the time to move back to Nigeria. It was a 1-year deal, and I was only going for a year.
Okay, so it was a 1-year deal with your employer, and it was also a 1-year deal with your wife?
Indeed.
Okay, so what were some of the practical outworkings of that for you as a couple? Were there any difficulties or challenges in executing the decision?
I wouldn't say there were any difficulties. Obviously, there were a few challenges because we had to kind of organize our finances in a way that, I didn't have to worry about, like where, how do we organize money and all that. And also with regards to the children, because I have 2 boys, and obviously not having their dad around would also be a challenge. So we had to kind of organize things around, those kind of questions.
Okay, fantastic. So you've brought up quite a couple of key issues that I'm going to come back to. But I wanted to find out, so when you moved to Nigeria, where did you stay, for example?
I stayed at her parents' place, and I think that was handy for me because all my comforts were taken care of. That was handy for her because then she was more reassured that in terms of things like accountability, things like temptation in Nigeria, which is a reality of things in Nigeria, that she was more reassured. Okay. And I didn't have any problems with that because I get on very well with her parents anyway.
Okay, fantastic. So was that a decision that, how did you come by that decision for you to stay with her parents?
I think it was convenient. It was either that or hotel accommodation, and I don't fancy staying long term or staying for prolonged periods in a hotel. So. And I think when I mentioned that I was coming to Nigeria for a time, her parents already offered and assumed that possibly that's what I would want to do.
Okay. I mean, I think it's fantastic in the sense that it gives you security as a wife to know that your husband is with, your parents. I mean, so you don't have to have any fears of a girl being squirreled away in some hotel, or stuff like that, But I can imagine that it's a very real temptation for some people who don't, for example, maybe get on with their in-laws or don't fancy moving in with their in-laws. Then the issue of maybe finding a flat or hotel becomes a reality. How would that have been for you? Do you feel that if you had to stay in a hotel or a flat?
Yeah, I suspect if I didn't have the option of staying with her parents, I would probably have rented a flat short term rather than a hotel. And I think part of the contract I had would have allowed for that.
So you were away for a year. What was it like? You mentioned earlier you have children. So I'm thinking about some of the practical things of, there's an emergency maybe at the child's school that you need to attend to, but your wife is here obviously, but some things that there would be an expectation that mom and dad would be there, or you're raising boys, there are challenges that, you know, really a man should take up. How did you manage those sorts of issues when you were away?
Well, this might sound very, very cliche, but I've never ever prayed as hard as I prayed during my stay in Nigeria. My prayers were focused on the children. Before I left, I had a very, very in-depth, deep talk with the kids, explaining to them what I was doing, how long I was going to be away from, and the importance of them behaving. And also throughout my stay in Nigeria, I was sort of on daily Skype to the family to just keep them in line. And during my visits to the UK, each time I'd sit down again with the children to remind them of what they have promised in terms of behavior and support for my wife. But I prayed. I really, really prayed.
So prayer was a deep anchor for
Yeah.
you.